what he sees as Julian done was actually service to the US and American citizens, exposing this corruption, these war crimes.
Now, the fate of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange could finally be settled at London's High Court tomorrow. He's wanted by US prosecutors on 18 charges, all bar one under the Espionage Act, over WikiLeaks' release of thousands of confidential US military records and secret diplomatic cables. At tomorrow's hearing, judges could agree to rubber stamp his extradition to the States, give him permission for a full appeal, or even set him free. In March, the High Court provisionally gave Mr. Assange permission to appeal, but said satisfactory assurances that the US would not seek the death penalty and would allow him a First Amendment right to free speech in a trial would make this unnecessary. Those assurances will be the focus of Monday's hearings. Well, let's talk to Gabriel Shipton, who is Julian Assange's brother and joins me in the studio. Gabriel, welcome to the programme.
Good to be with you.
There was quite a lead in there before I introduced you. What's your focus tomorrow?
Yeah, well, it's going to be on these assurances, the ones that you outlined. The assurance around the death penalty is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The other assurance where they say Julian may seek to rely on a First Amendment defence, I think that's the more complicated one that the prosecution is going to have trouble with, and hopefully the judges see that for what it is and rule in Julian's favour. But typically with these insurances, they're always a bait and switch.
Britain and America are very, very close allies, special relationship. Are you saying the British government, the courts, cannot take seriously or as read whatever the Americans tell them?
Well, they typically do, and they take them on face value. But once Julian is on US soil, all bets are off. There's no way to uphold these assurances. They're not legally binding, so they're not really worth the paper they're printed on. Amnesty International actually says that. So yeah, I'm calling it more of a bait and switch. They'll say whatever they can to get Julian on their soil, to prosecute him and punish him for what they see as a threat to the way that they do business around the world with their endless wars, corruption, and war crimes.
Gabriel, you've flown in from Australia for this hearing tomorrow. How hopeful are you that Julian, that the campaign will get what you want out of the High Court tomorrow?
Well, I think we're at a point in this campaign to free Julian that we've never been this close for Julian being free ever before. Yeah. We saw just last month, President Biden, when he was asked, is he considering the Australian request to drop the charges against Julian, he actually stated, yes, we're considering it. Yeah. So this is now a contentious prosecution, even in the United States. You've had the Australian government who've been advocating for Julian at a diplomatic level.
But not as strongly as you have always wanted. I mean, they've been slightly apologetic about their request for him to either be freed or at least for a extradition, lack of extradition, to be confirmed.
That's right, and we were always pushing the Australian government, or requesting the Australian government actually work harder to free Julian, because they have quite a considerable amount of leverage with the US government and the UK. We're in this trilateral partnership, the AUKUS military alliance. So we're always asking the Australian government to use that strategic leverage to free one of their own citizens. But it's not just the Australian government. You've got world leaders all through Latin America, including the president of Brazil. Mm-hmm. You have the Pope.
Lula Ignacio da Silva, yeah.
Yes, you got the Pope, who met with Julian's wife last year. So we're at this point in the campaign where it's a litmus test, really. If you support the freedom of Julian Assange, it says something about you. It's based. You're actually standing for something, whereas those who are standing against his freedom, I think it says more about them than it does about Julian.
Nonetheless, there are people who will be keen to get their hands on Julian Assange in the States, and there might also be people here in this country who are listening to this and say, well, I mean, it's not really about freedom of speech. I mean, these were stolen cables. They were sent to Julian Assange. He wasn't acting as a journalist. He was acting as an activist and a publisher. Whether you're talking about October 2010, 400,000 classified military military files chronicling the Iraq War. I'm looking at about 6 or 7 different major releases, which some defense officials say put individuals in harm's way. He didn't act as a journalist, marshalling and carefully editing. He said, there you go, let's embarrass these people.
Well, there's actually no proof that anybody came to any harm from any of these leaks. What the actual proof is if you look at the leaks, it's evidence of war crimes. The most famous being the collateral murder video of a helicopter gunship in Iraq mowing down unarmed Reuters journalists. So that is the actual evidence of harm in this situation. There was, during Chelsea Manning's trial, the leaker of this information, because Julian didn't leak this information. He published it alongside many other newspapers around the world, such as the New York Times. In that trial, the Obama administration engaged a former general to actually investigate and try and find anybody who was harmed. And they spent millions and millions of dollars searching, investigating, and they couldn't find anyone. And they've admitted that in open court. They admitted that in Julian's extradition hearing as well. So we really push back on that claim that there was harm, because the actual harm that was done is what Julian exposed.
Yeah. When was the last time you were able to see Julian? He's been in prison, I think, in Belmarsh for about 5 years now, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. He had his 5-year anniversary in Belmarsh on the 11th of April, sorry. I saw him at the end of February.
Yeah.
And it's this whole process, it's taking its toll on him. His health is deteriorating. He's been detained one way or another for the past 13 years.
Because in the Ecuadorian embassy first, wasn't it?
Yeah, for 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy. My daughter is now 10 years old, and she's never known Julian as a free man. So he's really suffering. He's aged, many more years than what he actually is. He's 52. He's 11 years older than me.
Yeah.
And it's extremely distressing going and seeing him inside the prison, and then it's affected our whole family. It's pulled our family apart. We're stuck all on different sides of the world, but it's also brought us together really in this fight. In this fight to free him, all our conversations together are, what are we going to do next? How are we going to fight to free Julian? Where are we going to take this fight next? So it'd be nice one day, just to be able to talk about regular family stuff.
Sure. You're off to the States on Tuesday to lobby for Julian. To what extent do you think is there a mood change in the US? Because you mentioned earlier what President Biden said he would consider that Australian request to drop the charges. But I'm just wondering how fertile the ground is. Is he going to Congress? Where are you going?
Well, most of the work I do over in Washington will be in Congress.
Yeah.
There's a resolution before the House Resolution 934. It's a bipartisan resolution. It's got 5 Democrats, 6 Republicans on it, and it's growing. There's more people joining that resolution every time I go over there and lobby. But really, I am getting a sense that there is a change there now. The amount of meetings that I'm able to get now in Washington compared to even last year.
Yeah.
It's 3, 4, 5 times as many meetings, Congress people taking meetings, their staff all wanting to know what's going on in this case.
What do you think's changed? And are you meeting Republicans?
Yes,
as well as Democrats?
Yeah, Republicans and Democrats. We work both sides of the aisle, of course. I attended the State of the Union address as Thomas Massey from Kentucky, a Republican congressman's guest. So we're always working both sides of the aisle. I think as people get more and more informed on this case, they understand what's at stake, particularly for the First Amendment and press freedoms in the United States. They can see that all the major news organizations around the world, particularly ones that collaborated with Julian, who actually wrote a letter to President Biden, the New York Times, Le Monde, El País, they see that these institutions are calling this out as a threat to press freedom. All the major US human rights, press freedom organizations have all written multiple letters. They actually sent one yesterday to the Attorney General calling on him to drop these charges. So it's there's a consensus now among publishers, among these human rights organizations, and a building constituency for Julian in the Congress as well. And I think it's about time, really, that there was more attention on this case like that.
Yeah, I remember former President Trump, I think when he was candidate Trump, saying, WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks. And then things kind of changed when he became president. Now, he could be president again, and Julian may still be in detention. What are your hopes or fears?
Well, so Trump, President Trump's son, Trump Jr., has said multiple times over the last year or so that he's changed his mind on Julian.
Yeah.
That what he sees as Julian done was actually service to the US and American citizens, exposing this corruption, these war crimes. So I'll be speaking at the Libertarian Convention on Friday. President Trump is actually speaking on the next day. So we're hoping to really push President Trump now to make a statement that he'll commit to. But you've seen Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's also, polling very, very well. From day one of his campaign, he has had a policy that on his first day of the presidency, he will pardon Julian Assange. And so now you see even having that as your political platform is not a losing
So it's
position.
no longer toxic.
No, is no longer toxic in that way. And so I expect, you've seen Biden say we're considering it. Now I expect Trump to come out and say something similar, and then we'll have total political consensus that this is, it's time for this to be taken off the books.
But in an ideal world, you're expecting the High Court tomorrow to do what?
To give leave for Julian. So I expect them to give leave to Julian to appeal, potentially
For a full appeal.
Yeah, for a full appeal on that First Amendment freedom of expression point, because I think Julian can win on that point in the UK courts. And it's an opportunity for the UK courts to actually stand up and say, hey, we have some sovereignty here. You can't use your espionage laws to reach into our country and take a publisher who was working here, because Julian he wasn't in the United States at the time.
Yeah.
He published from the UK. So this could be potentially used against any UK publisher. So it's important that the courts stand up to this to protect the UK press as well.
All right, Gabriel Shipton, filmmaker and brother of Julian Assange, thank you very much. We'll have more on this story tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed for coming in to see us